My father was a revolutionist against the Tsar in Russia, and he went around to small towns. He was born in Vitebsk, which is a big town, but he went to small towns and started um, libraries for working class people and organized, um, can't think of the word, that they were against the Tsar. He had to leave the country under a falsified visa as another woman's husband. He left my mother with three children, expecting the fourth. Um, he came to this country, came to Omaha because all my mother's family was here. And when, after 4 years, he brought his family, my two brothers, my oldest sister, and my 3-year-old little sister. I was born the following year. The doctor that came to deliver me said the baby is dead, I can't save the mother, and my aunt slapped him. He said, "The hell with all of you," and walked out. So she called her doctor. I was told, I was there, but I don't remember. I was told that I weighed a little over 2 pounds, and they put me in a cigar box. I was born cross-eyed. I'm amazed, and when I look back at how cruel people can be, even adults. I was cross-eyed, my teeth, my bottom teeth closed over the upper teeth. I couldn't have anything done till I went to work. And adults can be awfully, awfully cruel. I was called cross-eyed, cockeyed, you name it, I was called it. I took a college prep course and about 3 months of typing. And then when I got out of school, I decided I'd rather go to work and give my parents things they never had than try to go to college. I was the youngest of 5. I never left home. I turned down a job in Washington. I turned down a job in Twin Cities. I never left home. Never thought I could get what I would get would make up for what I would lose by leaving home. The first job I had, I was selling want ads for a German newspaper. Then I went to work for the World Herald. Ruth Pollock was in charge of the want ad department. And from then on, every job I ever got was the result of a telephone conversation. I would talk to somebody, whether a motor to begin with, and they'd say, "Hey, how about coming to work for us?" They sold Buicks. When they closed up, I went to work for Greenlee Sleed Motors. At one time, I heard that Mr. Lead Sr. was anti-Semitic. And one day, I just couldn't take it any longer. I walked in and I said, "Mr. Lead, I hear that you're anti-Semitic, and as long as I feel that way, I can't do my job right." And he said to me, "I hired you and you were Jewish." I said, "Yes." He said, "When you needed help, you hired somebody and they were Jewish." I said, "Yes." He says, "Does that sound like I'm anti-Semitic?" I said, "No." I apologized and went back to work. One of our customers was Colonel Samuel J. Sutherland, who was commanding officer at Fort Crook, which was I can't think of the word. They had horses out there anyway. And I never talked to him, but his orderly brought his car in, and I always talked to his orderly. And one day I said to him, "My brother and I love to ride horses, but it's $1 an hour. We can't afford it." I said, "I understand you have horses out there." He said, "Yeah, would you like to ride?" "Oh, yeah." He said, "Well, you go out to the stable and you tell them Colonel Sutherland said you could ride his mount. So my brother and I several Sundays went out and rode horseback through Bellevue back in those days. And we just thoroughly enjoyed it. One day he said he thought, when I was talking to him over his phone about his car, that it would be nice to meet someone that was riding horseback. So my brother and I walked over, knocked at the door of where he lived. No answer. That was fine. We did what he requested. And then one day when I was talking to him about his car, I said, "Boy, that must be a wonderful place to work." He said, "Would you like to work out here?" I said, "Oh, I would love it." He said, "Why don't you come out and talk to me?" I said, "Well, the only time I can come is a Saturday afternoon. That's the only time I'm not working." So he says, "Come out on a Saturday afternoon." So I did, and it was a fall day and unusually warm, and 24th and I waited and waited for a bus. I'd never been on a military installation before. And I walked, I came to headquarters, said, "I have an appointment with Colonel Sutherland." And they said, "Oh, no, you want to see the adjutant." I didn't know what an adjutant was. And I said, "No, I don't want to see no adjutant. I want to see Colonel Sutherland." And they said, "You must, he's in quarters for the cold. You must want to see the adjutant." I said, "No." So they called him, and he said yes to send me over. The commanding officer's home was right across from headquarters, across the parade grounds. And they said they would send an orderly with me. I didn't know what an orderly was, and I didn't need an orderly. Start me in the right direction, I'll find it. So they finally showed me where to go. I went to the door, and I was so tired, and to this day I can't believe I was so discourteous. I said, "Boy, you'd sure think you were damned important around here from the amount of red tape I had to go through to see you." He turned his head back and he laughed and he laughed. He said, "I don't know how important I am, but I sure got the boys around here fooled." And he says, "Before we start talking," he says, "I want to tell you something. If you go to work here and you find you're being intimidated by rank, by the medals on a man's chest," he says, "close your eyes for a minute and remember that in the bathtub we all look alike and we have to get into our pants one leg at a time." I never forgot that. We talked for a while, and he said, "Would you like to go to work for the CCCs, the Civilian Conservation Corps?" I don't know what that is, but he says it pays $105 a month. I was making $80 a month. And he says, no Saturday afternoons or Wednesday afternoons. I was working Wednesday afternoon. And he says 27 days a year sick leave, 27 days a year annual leave. Sounds wonderful. I said, "Yes, I'd love that." So we called over the quartermaster, and they went through it and signed it and said I could go to work the following Monday, I think it was. And when the quartermaster left, he said, "You know, I like to be nice to people, but I like to have people nice to me." And I thought, "Oh, am I going to lose this job?" So I looked at him and I said, "You know what? I like to be nice to people, but I like to be nice just because I want to be nice. I don't expect anything in return. I'm sure I misunderstood you, sir, and I want to apologize because I know you're a perfect gentleman, and I know I misunderstood you." He says, "You did. The job's yours." Never saw the man again except once walking across the parade ground. And he said to me at the time, he had a beautiful library. He had told me I could come borrow books, and he said to me, "How come you never came to borrow books?" And I says, "Sir, after working here for a little while, I realized how important you are, and I wouldn't think of taking advantage of such a wonderful offer." That was in 1935. I was hired, I showed you that, for a period not to extend beyond 1937, I think it said. And I worked for 32 years with never taking a civil service exam, with never taking a physical. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I found that I was secretary and I don't take shorthand. I had 3 months of typing. I think I did what I was taught. I used my cup. I'd open a letter after being there for a while, and I have things to back it. And I would write what I thought was the answer, and I'd put it on my boss's desk. I had a colonel that once called me at home at night and said, "Oh, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you take the thoughts right out of my mind and put them on paper." To me, that was just using your cup. After you've worked someplace for a while, you should know the answers. I worked for, I was at the Service Command Surgeon's office during the war, and it was my good fortune to be working with some of the best doctors in their field that were in the service. I ran into anti-Semitism once. I was asked to take a call from Fitzsimmons General Hospital. This was during the war. And because there wasn't anybody there, I didn't take shorthand, but they said, make notes in longhand. And this officer said, they needed doctors desperately, but don't send Jews. That's all I had to hear. I walked into Major Marchett's office and I was just furious. And I said, I have a brother in the Army. I have a nephew that fought in the Battle of the Bulge. I was just furious. And he said, well, Fitzsimmons General Hospital is a sort of a town all of its own, and Jewish people didn't mingle like some others. I said, I wish you people would make up your mind. If we try to join your clubs, you don't like it. If we don't want to join your damn clubs, now we're being criticized for that. Anyway, that was the only time I ever ran into anti-Semitism. My name is Geraldine Gimple LaPierre. I was born March 18th, 1912. We lived I was born across the street from Killam School. I don't remember too much of that. But then we moved to 19th and, I forgot, Nicholas, I think. I don't remember. And we were there for a while. Then we moved to 22nd between Grace and Burdette. Mrs. Blumkin from Nebraska Clothing Company, Nebraska Furniture, was a neighbor. All our neighbors were Jewish at that time. J.O. Richard's family lived next door to us. The house on the other side was the only one that wasn't sold to someone, and we had all kinds of neighbors, from the Whitmans, the Schreiers at one time, and then next door to them was the Kaplans. My mother was a Kaplan, so the Kaplans were distantly related to us. And then the Bernsteins, and the family was there. We lived there till I was 14 years of age. My Zeta and Bubby lived here, and they lived on Charles Street, between 24th and 25th. So I was very fortunate. I remembered my Zeta very much. He lived with us in later years. Then we moved to 22nd and Fowler Avenue. And my Zeta lived with us. And when he did anything that was wrong, he lived to be 107 when that was almost impossible. And when he did something that was wrong, and my mother called him on that, he would look at her and very easily say, "Kannst nicht während Pfleges abmilben, an alter Mann, ich weiß nicht, und besser." Translated, You can't get mad at me. I'm an old man and I don't know any better. And he got away with everything, let me tell you. I always liked mixing. I went to Tech High, and then, as I told you, where I went to work. And at one time, I can very well remember having the chief of chaplains for the Civilian Conservation Corps and a colonel for dinner, and my Zeta, who did not speak or understand English, and my parents. I never apologized. I thought that was wonderful, mixing them.
What was your Zeta's name?
Common Kaplan. And can I tell a little off-color thing? My Zeta said that he once had a horse that wouldn't run, and he didn't know how to get him started. So he took a potato, he put it in the stove, he got it red hot, he put it in the horse's tush, and he took off, and he never had trouble with that horse again. That was my Zeta's favorite story. At the table, going back to having the different people there for dinner, we all sat around. My parents spoke broken English, but we all sat around and were talking and we were laughing, and my Zeta didn't know what we said, and then all of a sudden in Yiddish he said, you can't lachen at me now, but when I was a young man the girls chased after me. I never apologized for the fact that my parents couldn't speak English or Zeta couldn't. I thought it was wonderful they came to this country and did what they did. I'm very family oriented, as you know. There are 5 living generations of my family. They live on both coasts, Oklahoma, Texas, and they all know each other. They all keep in touch. Recently, my niece had a 60th wedding anniversary, and there were 5 living generations of my family here.
What were the names of your brothers or sisters?
My brother was Nathan Gimple, and he owned Grand Central Market. My sister was Ethel Blywise and Ida Erb's mother. My sister Rose is Rose Gaspar. She lives in Oklahoma. Both of her sons are doctors. One of them lives in Tulsa, where his mother is in a home like this. The other one lives in Dallas. My brother Nate was married to Rose Ricks. And Judy and her sister, I just got through sending her sister a card. I think that takes care of all my family. No, my brother Dave was married to Esther. What was Esther's maiden name? The cup don't work so good. I can't remember that. My husband worked at Port Cook. He was working in civilian personnel. I met him. We went together 12 years before we were married. Number one, because it took a while until my parents accepted it. I think at the end, if I had divorced my husband, my mother would have gone with my husband instead of me. That was the kind of relationship they had. And then because he worked in Montana, he worked in Milwaukee, and I never left home. I turned down a job in Washington. I turned down a job in Twin Cities. I never wanted to leave home. I never thought I could gain anything that would make up for the loss of being close to family and being with my family. I just hate what's happened now with kids going away to school, they never come back. I just hate that because to me, and that's for my father, to me, family, the only immortality there is a little bit you leave behind in your family. So I'm very, very family oriented. I never left home. We went together when Ida's oldest daughter, when Ida Forbes' oldest daughter got married. My husband flew in, and as we were coming out of Beth Israel, he said to me, "We're going to get married in 5 years." And I said, "What?" "Yeah, we're going to get married." I said, "Oh, what are you talking about?" He says, "They're going to pass a law in 5 years where civil service workers who have 30 years service can retire at age 55. He always said he married an older lady. I was born in March of 1912. He was born July 4th of 1912. Therefore, I was several months older than he was. And sure enough, they did pass the law, and we both retired, and we both got married. And we took my mom, and we went to Milwaukee to babysit. I always went to babysit kids. My nephew, who was a doctor, had 4 children in 3 years. They had twins. I remember when he called me from Louisville, and he said, "Aunt Jerry, do you know how to take care of twins?" I said, "Oh, it'll be a first for you, it'll be a first for me." One of his sons, to this day, he couldn't say Auntie Geraldine, so he called me Auntie Jellybean, and I still get letters to Auntie Jellybean. And I went to his wedding 2 years ago. Leslie Cully went with me so I could go. And he got up and he said it was the happiest day of his life because he was marrying the girl he loved, and his Auntie Jellybean came to his wedding, and she was always there when he needed his diaper changed. Since I could get leave, I always went when babies were born. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had no children. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I must confess, I was ready to go home after a week or two. I was married to my husband almost 25 years when he died. His birthday was July 4th. And the Jews and the Catholics always got together for his birthday and had a ball. We traveled to Canada to meet all his family. And it was one of the most wonderful times of my life. They were wonderful to me. As you probably know, the difference between the Canadian French and our people here is that we think that the thing that we should do when we have company is take them to the best restaurant in town. The Canadian French think that the height of sociability is to entertain them in their home with their nicest china and all. Well, I'm not a drinker. I don't like it. I can't drink. So I wasn't drinking. All of a sudden one of his cousins said, come on. Where are we going? Come on. She was taking me to a liquor store to buy Mogan David wine because she thought I wasn't drinking the wine because it wasn't Mogan David. He had a cousin who was a nun, a cousin who was a priest, and the priest came to have dinner with us, and he handed me a little package, and I was almost ashamed, I knew it was a gift, and I was almost afraid to open it. What could it be? That maybe something I wouldn't want, being Jewish. And he kept saying, open it. So finally I did. And there was a little plaque that just said, "Give us this day our daily bread." I was treated beautifully. I was very lucky. In there I will show you, I just got from my sister-in-law she wrote a story about the LaPierres, and she sent me the book. I had a wonderful Jewish family and gained a wonderful Catholic family. I was keeping kosher when I first got married. In fact, my husband was very opposed to when I stopped keeping separate dishes because he figured it was part of my religion and I should do it, but it got a little bit difficult. My sister-in-laws would come and they would be so afraid of mixing my dishes, they wanted to make coffee. But Jerry, is this the right dish to use? I was very lucky. I had a wonderful Jewish family, but I gained a wonderful Catholic family. And they're still my family. I still hear from all of them. I have a stepson and his wife. They came to see me about 2 years ago, and his mother is living. I never talk to my stepson that I don't say to him, "How's your mother?" At the time, my husband was divorced for 20 years before I started going with him. But when he died and I got a card from his ex-wife, I wrote her a letter and thanked her for raising a wonderful son and sharing him with me. Um, David is wonderful, and I have a wonderful daughter-in-law. I just think I was very lucky. I, I, I just thank God there's pictures of my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law on the refrigerator. There's pictures of my husband holding my nieces and nephews wherever we went. I think Uncle Frenchie was the favorite. He taught the kids always came for summer vacation. His nieces and nephews, my nieces and nephews, my stepson, and Frenchie taught him to play golf and things like that. So I'm very grateful. I think I was very lucky. I think I'm still very lucky. I have a wonderful family, and they're all so nice to me that I think I'm very lucky to have had them, and I'm very grateful. I thank God every night. I belong to Beth Israel. I never go. Incidentally, my husband's name is on the board of remembrance or whatever they call it, along with my mother, fathers, and brothers. I was very, very grateful when they put my husband's name on there. I belong to Beth Israel because my parents belong to it. I pay dues. I never go. I'm willing to support a synagogue for people who do want to go. I would like to see a place where anybody could go in and pray any way they want to. I sit at the edge of my bed every night and say a prayer. I don't know formal prayers. My prayer is thanking God for all my blessings and asking Him to please look after all my loved ones. That's the way I pray. I think it would be wonderful if the money that was spent on shuls and churches were used to help people, and you just had a place to go in where anybody could go in and pray any way they want to. That's the way I feel about religion. I'm not about to criticize God. If God feels that different people should be on earth, that's fine with me. And as I said, I just wish there was a place where anybody could go in and pray any way they want to. And I really, and I will be buried next to my husband at West Lawn Cemetery. I will have a Jewish funeral. There, my husband and I agreed a certain amount of whatever money we had would go to the Catholic Church and to the Jewish synagogue. I was very fortunate in that I get mad when I see or read Ann Landers where she says children shouldn't be responsible for their parents. Some of my most wonderful, to show you how easy it is, when we got married, first we went to Minneapolis. My great niece was having surgery. We took care of their children. Then we went, and Mom was with us. Then my sister in Oklahoma City was going to travel that winter, and we were going to go there for the winter and be in their home. We went to Waterloo, Iowa first, and my sister-in-laws wanted us to come for dinner, and we said, no, There's a dining room at the top of the hotel. We're saying, come over and have dinner with us because Mom's with us and it's a little easier. This was our honeymoon. And we had connecting rooms, and when my mom got tired, I took her in and got her ready for bed and propped her door open so she could hear everything that was going on. I don't like it when Ann Landers or anybody else says children shouldn't be responsible for their parents. Some of the most wonderful memories I have before we got married. When we were, one time my father threw my husband out of the house because he wasn't Jewish. But before we got married, my husband said, how about taking your folks and you down to Louisville, Kentucky, where my nephew was practicing medicine, and there was great-grandchildren there. And I said, oh, that would be wonderful. And my parents agreed. And that was the first time my dad shared a motel room with Frenchie. We weren't married. And I shared one with Mother. And I'll never forget it because when we got to Louisville, Frenchie took Dad and me. Mom couldn't go. We went through a cigarette factory, then we went through Seagram's. And my father, in a very loud voice, said, when I went through the cigarette factory, they gave us samples. They didn't give us samples at Seagram's. My dad had a wonderful sense of humor, incidentally. He worked at Kilpat's. Incidentally, they were supposed to be anti-Semitic. And they were absolutely wonderful to my dad. And one day he came home with a little bag and he said, see, I told you it pays to keep your mouth shut. And we said, what are you talking about, Dad? And he talked broken English. I told you it pays to keep your mouth shut. My father had false teeth and would never wear them. He put them in the drawer. They wouldn't wear out that way. And he said, you know what? I walked past the candy counter, and they gave me this little bag of chocolate-covered nuts. If I'd opened my mouth and they saw I didn't have any teeth, they never would have given me the candy. This was my dad's sense of humor. I had wonderful parents. I'm so glad that I never left home. I wouldn't give up my memories for anything in the world. And I think children miss so much. I think one of the things that most upsets me nowadays is that once kids go away to college, they never come back. The relationship from here is not the same as the relationship here. I don't think my brothers and sisters had the same relationship with parents as I had because of the fact that I never left home. I've never regretted it. I have some of the most wonderful memories in the world. I just feel sorry that kids, that everybody says they have to be on their own or they have to leave home. Or another thing that I feel strongly about is I don't think everybody has to go to college. I'm a firm believer in the old Jewish saying, you have to use your cup. You can't know all the answers. The important thing is to know where to go to get an answer. You'd be surprised at how few people know that they have a reference department in the public libraries. You can call and get an answer to anything. For a long time, towards the end, I worked at the hospital at Offutt for 18 and a half years. And I knew all the men in the engineers. I just knew that if you got hold of the right person, had a legitimate request, said please and thank you, you could get anything done. It was just knowing, and as a result, I was the one that handled any repairs or anything that had to be done to the hospital. I went to board utilization meetings that the engineers had, and I was the only woman. And the colonel that was in charge, the engineers, once said, when you see Miss Gimple walking in and her bottom lip is so far out that she's ready to stumble over, you might as well say yes and get it over with so we can go on with our meeting. I just believe in the old good Jewish saying, you gotta use your cup.
Who were some of your friends when you were going to Tech High School?
Well, Millie Cattleman. I really didn't have a lot. Because one thing you're overlooking is that I was so unhappy because because I didn't have my eyes operated on until after I went to work. I've had 5 operations on my eyes. I lost my teeth. I was a very lonesome kid. Incidentally, Art Grossman is responsible for some of the changes. When we had our 50th school, I went to school with his wife, reunion. I didn't want to go. And my husband talked me into it. And it probably was one of the best things that I ever did. I was very unhappy. You have no idea of what it's like to go to school, be cross-eyed, and have your upper teeth closing over the bottom and one on top of the other. I was a miserable kid. It wasn't until I've had 5 operations on my eyes. It wasn't until I got my eyes straightened, until I lost most of my teeth I can't remember really being close or having close friends when I was going to high school.
So your family members were really your close friends?
Yes, the idea was that I just cannot tell you how cruel even adults can be. I hope that when it's my time to die, there are 2 things I don't want to have to worry about. I hope I don't owe anybody any money, and I won't. And I hope I never have hurt anybody. I feel very, very strongly about that. I can remember we had a house with a porch that went around like this. I can remember at 8 or 9 years old wondering how you commit suicide. But people can be cruel, and I'm not talking about just children. People can be awfully, awfully cruel. I just never want to hurt anybody. I don't know whether you haven't been around here, but I never go to lunch or dinner without carrying a book. We have an awfully lot of people here that complain that I just never want to hurt anybody. I don't want to hear gossip. I don't want to be guilty of ever hurting anybody.
So do you feel that the experiences that you had when you were young profoundly affected you as you grew older?
Oh, of course. Oh, of course. For a long time, I couldn't believe that Frenchie loved me. It was just, without a doubt. You want to remember that parents in those days didn't know from, they were so busy raising you and having, and feeding you and all, they didn't know from, maybe child hurts mentally or something. Don't misunderstand me. I had wonderful parents. But
tell me about some of the travels, some of your experiences with Frenchie after you got married.
Well, first of all, I went to Europe before I was married. My nephew was in the Army of Occupation, So I went to Europe, and we traveled through Europe. And then I went to London and looked up some of my father. My father's sister went to London. So I met some of my English cousins in London. Uh, One of the experiences I had that was unusual is on the way back in the plane, at that time, they carried double uh, crew when they flew over the ocean. So I was sitting right behind the cockpit with this one that was one of the navigators, and I talked about working for the Air Force, and we got to talking, and he said, "Have you ever been in the cockpit?" And I said, "No." He said, "Would you like to be?" And I, "Oh yeah, I would love to be." You fly over. In those days, you flew over the ocean at night because there's nothing to see. So he says, "Wait till everybody's asleep and I'll take you in the cockpit." I said, "Okay." So I did, and I never was afraid of flying until then. They were flying on instruments. The pilot and co-pilot were drinking coffee, and I thought, ooh. And the only one that was paying any attention was the navigator. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? It's the only time I've been afraid of flying. Um, that was in 1955. I went through Europe just before I was married. After I was married, my husband loved to travel. We knew between my family, his family, and both having worked for the military, we knew someone everywhere. We'd start out for California, and it might take us 3 or 4 weeks to get there, but it was wonderful. Stop in Oklahoma City, where my sister lived. We'd stop in Dallas, where my nephew lived. We went down to Shreveport, Louisiana, where Frenchie knew the husband who was a colonel at Offutt, and his wife worked with me, so we went down there. We'd stop in Phoenix, where Frenchie's sister lived. We'd stop in Albuquerque. Incidentally, every Hanukkah I get a phone call. The woman that made that picture for me, husband worked for Frenchie. She's dead. But he called me every Hanukkah from Albuquerque to wish me a happy Hanukkah. We'd stop in San Diego, where Frenchie's brother lives. We spent a month or two one winter in an apartment in San Diego. We spent a month or two in an apartment in Phoenix, where his sister lived. One of the things, because I never would have thought of going there, but my husband always, he made out itineraries, and I have copies of them, where if we were going east when we went to Canada, wherever I had a relative, wherever he had a relative, we stopped in New York and visited cousins of mine. My cousin Harold Sibbon was teaching medicine, and can't remember now. We stopped and saw him. But one of the trips we took that was most unusual, because I never would have thought about it, we went down to South Padre Island, and we spent a New Year's Eve and Christmas there. Frenchie liked to drive, and he picks out an itinerary. He knew he didn't like to start until after the morning rush. He knew exactly where he would be around 4 or 5 o'clock, because he didn't like to drive in a strange city at night. He knew an easy on, easy off motel. We knew just where we were staying. And we did a lot of traveling when he was living.
Irv and Ida Forbes just had an anniversary. And you
60th.
told me, well, tell me about all the relatives that came to this anniversary. You said there were 5 generations.
Yes. Their kids all came from California. My brother's 2 daughters came from Virginia and Massachusetts.
What were their names?
Oh, my brother, Judy Gimple and Shirley Eckelman. are their two daughters. Um, uh, my sister and her son came from Dallas. Um,
Her name is?
Dr. Gaspar and his wife, and my sister Rose Gaspar, and Dr. Gaspar's daughter and son-in-law. Um, Incidentally, she intermarried, and I'm trying to see the names. She intermarried and he converted, and he is very active in the Jewish synagogue, and they live in Salt Lake City. They came, uh, Kathy and Dern. Their name is Kathy and Bob Dern, and their children were with them. Uh, my brother's son, Larry Gimple, came from California. Naturally, all of Irv and Ida's kids, grandchildren and great-grandchildren were here. Um, the whole mishpacha was here. I've got all kind of pictures I can show you. Two of them are hanging on my refrigerator. On the 3rd of January, I went to the hospital, and I was shocked now at what they do. There were about 15 people in her room, and everybody got to hold the baby.
Whose baby?
Tim Cully's. Leslie and Bill became grandparents. And incidentally, my let's see, Bob was my sister's, Ida's brother's daughter and little boy just moved here from Austin, Texas, and she is teaching at Montessori school. Her name is Ellen Batt, and her son is going to Montessori school. And for 2 days he was here with me because she started teaching before he went to school. So I can't say I babysat because he's 10 years old, but it was my great nephew that I had here. They all know each other. That's the remarkable thing. They live from coast to coast, and they keep in touch, and they visit with each other, and they all know each other.
You know, Jerry, I know you as a person whom everyone loves. They think you're fun. They love to be with you. If you could say anything to your family at this time so that they will remember you the way you want to be remembered, what would it be?
I hope they remember Aunt Jerry and Jelly Bean as someone who is very family-oriented, that believes that there's nothing more important than family. I think that one of the saddest things of our life today is the fact that because of job commitments, going to school, families are separated. I do not believe that the relationship like this can be like the relationship here. I would want them to remember Aunt Jerry as... I'm Aunt Jerry to everybody, though. I don't know if you know that, but my lawyer calls me Aunt Jerry.
Yes.
Bob Nelson, who takes care of my financial things, calls me Aunt Jerry. I got a letter from his daughter that she had a baby, and I'm Aunt Jerry. Many years ago, I used to go to Peony Park, and Leslie or Karen would be there, and everybody, oh, there's Aunt Jerry. So I'm just, I wasn't fortunate enough to have children, but I'm just Aunt Jerry to everybody. I'm just grateful that my nieces and nephews, my sisters and brothers shared their kids with me. I love children. I was going to say I love people. But when you live in a place like this, you hear so much bitching. I don't want to go into that. I think that what you have to do when I came here to live, for instance, I didn't come here to die. I came here. Oh, I forgot to ask. Would you like some hot tea? I've got all kinds of tea.
Well, what I think we would like to do is include some of your pictures in this video.
Uh, Look at all those pictures. Um, you want
Well,
some?
let's stop now, and then we'll include them.
Would you like to have some tea? These pictures were taken when I would say about 50 years old. My husband was working in civilian personnel in Montana. I don't remember the name of the Air Force base there. And I was working in Omaha, probably at the hospital. I don't remember just where. And they were taken about the same time. Um, he sent it from Montana, and of course I had mine taken here in Omaha. That's my Zeta and Bubba, Yusel Kalman and Bubba Tsipa. They lived on Charles Street between 24th and 25th. Oh my goodness, I don't know. I'm going to be 89 years old. I would say that picture was taken before I was born, so it's older than 89 years old. I remember being at their house. I remember going on Fridays to tear toilet paper so they wouldn't have to for the Shabbos. They had a fence in their front. Once when I went with some other kids to see my Zeta and Bubba, I was crossing the street on 24th and Charles and got hit by an American, something, automobile. And as a result, my right arm was broken in 3 ways. When I went back to school, my teacher's name was Gertrude Reynolds, and she told me that I would never be able to write legibly. So I got mad. When I graduated from the grade schools, I was the second best writer in the Omaha public school system. That was so I would show her that I could write well. That's my mother and father, William, and sometimes she was Margaret and sometimes she was Mary, and she had a sister, and her name was Melka. My mother's name was Margola, and sometimes they got their names mixed up. They were 2 of the most wonderful people in the world. Incidentally, when my mother died, I got letters and calls from people I didn't even know telling me things. My mother, she did not belong to a shul. She did not, she did belong, but she didn't go. She didn't belong to clubs. But she was Mother Gimple. I don't think I ever worked with anybody that called her Mrs. Gimple. She was Mother Gimple or Bobby Gimple to everybody. In fact, one of my fondest memories is when Ida Forbes and Irv were living in Minnelusa, and their kids were little, and we were living in Minnelusa. And when my mother was coming up the hill to go to their house, the little Goyisha kids would yell, "Here comes your Bobby, here comes your Bobby." I don't think I ever worked with anybody that didn't call my mother either Mother Gimple or Bobby Gimple. She was never Mrs. Gimple. And I think one of the nicest things that was ever said is that one of my friends from work came to her funeral, and she said it was the only funeral where if she didn't know who they were talking about, she would know who they were talking about by what they said. That they said about she was never Mrs. Gimple. She was Mother Gimple or Bobby Gimple or Grandma Gimple to everybody. And they told of some of the things she did. And they said it was the only funeral they ever went to where they knew who they were talking about. And I think she was a most unusual woman. My dad, too. Of course, when you look back at his life, he went around, he had to leave Russia on a falsified visa as somebody else's husband because they were looking for him and he would have been sent to Siberia because he went around and started libraries for poor people, for working people, and organized unions. So he had, and my mother had to steal across the Granites, that's the borders, isn't it? Because she didn't have a visa at night. So my father was a revolutionist against the Tsar, unfortunately. Well, I don't know that it's unfortunately. I don't know about that part because I wasn't born. That is my mother-in-law, and her name was Delia Roussier, and she was French-Canadian, and they moved to Waterloo, Iowa, because my father-in-law was a carpenter, and he helped build the church there. And let's see, Frenchie had 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and they lived in Waterloo, Iowa. I never met my father-in-law, but I met my mother-in-law, and she was just an absolutely wonderful person. I could. That's taken in front of Maxine Warren's house. She lived in Ohio. I can't remember the town, and at one time, she was my beauty operator, and we just remained friends and corresponded. Her husband was in the military when I first met her. We were both living in Minnelusa, and we just became very good friends. And when we went to visit Frenchie's cousins who lived in Columbus, Ohio, we went over to Maxine's and spent a night with her, and that's taken in front of her garage as we are leaving. This is the commanding officer of Erling Bergquist Hospital handing me a award for superior service, and he was the commanding officer of medical supply where I worked, and he was assistant to the medical supply officer. This is many of superior. Every year you were rated, and this, well, if you got a, this was a superior rating, and I don't remember, $100 or something award I got with it. Me, this, I'm rather proud of this because I never took a civil service exam. I was hired for a period not to extend beyond the date on that, and I worked for 32 years without a break of service. And when I started, we were under civil service regulations, but we weren't civil service. And then they passed the Ramspact Act, and it took it into civil service. I was supposed to take a civil service exam and a physical, and my boss wrote a letter saying I had worked all those years and did a superior job. He did not think I needed to take a civil service exam, and I did not use my sick leave. Consequently, he didn't think I needed a physical. And that's a story that appeared in the World Herald. Actually, they were supposed to have a story. They came out and took pictures when I had 5 generations for dinner here. But he ended up saying that our talking together, I invited him for lunch, made a better story. So that's how that happens to be in the Omaha World Herald. I never knew him before, but I met his wife, called and asked if she could come have lunch with me, and came with the children and had lunch with me. I have received so many outstanding rewards for work. Every year you were rated, but I'm a little bit partial to this because it came from the United States Air Force. Some of these were given to me. They had a party when I retired, and whereas most times when you had a party, it was limited to your own group that you were working for. This was open base-wise. Leslie brought my mother, but because I had worked with so many people, getting favors for the hospital, getting things for instance, I called Mrs. B when they made a uh, room for officers at the hospital and asked her if she would donate a TV and carpet, and she did. Mrs. B used to be a neighbor of ours. I babysat her children. So I'm just a little bit partial and proud of the fact that that came from the United States Air Force and not the immediate hospital where I worked.